It's time now to take a look through the morning's papers. Joining me to do that is Arva Ahmed, the founder of Frying Pan Adventures, the writer or the setting upper of ILiveInAFryingPan.com blog. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely to have you on. Let's talk first of all about your blog, I Live in a Frying Pan. So you're obviously a foodie at heart, and then you took it to the blogging level. Why did you do that?
Well, I always wanted to write about food. Initially, that idea was born actually when I was in New York. So I've done my higher, even though I grew up in Dubai, I've done my higher education, my undergrad and my master's in the US. And I worked in New York, which is a foodie capital of the world. And it was there where you sort of almost become a food fanatic and you start reading about food and everyone's talking to you about food, and you're constantly immersed in that environment. And that's actually where I started realizing, oh my God, these blogs are an incredible source of hidden information that you normally cannot find, just walking around on the streets. And it was from there that that idea was born that, oh God, I wish one day I could start my own blog. But the life in New York is such that you don't get time to do anything. So it was only when I moved back to Dubai, I started working with my dad, that I finally was able to take that goal and realize it. And so Dubai is where that food blog was finally born.
And then from that, the ideas of Frying Pan Adventures was born.
It was. What happened was when I first started blogging, as most people who first start blogging, you're experimenting your own personal writing style, what content you're comfortable with. So I began by writing about everything under the sun, the high end, the middle. And the minute PR companies know that you're out there, they're going to start offering you lots of free food, which is a big kicker, for a lot of bloggers. But after some time, you realize that the things you're passionate about don't necessarily overlap with the things that are free. And in fact, I personally, this is a personal belief, but I really feel if you want to build credibility, you've got to try and take as less of the free stuff as possible. So eventually it turned out that as I started blogging, I realized that the things that I was most passionate about was actually completely the opposite of the stuff that was being given for free. And it was the stuff in old Dubai. This is the side of Dubai that I grew up in. This is the side of Dubai that I still live in. And this is the side of Dubai that to me actually feels really connected to the childhood that I had here. And so I just started walking the streets, scouring out places that may not have always been there when I grew up, but the point was each of them represented a piece of the city. If you're sitting in one of those restaurants, you could be nowhere else but in Dubai, And I just got so passionate about that idea that one day I was driving home from work, and this is when I was working with my dad, and I was talking to a friend called Shaban, and I said, I really wish I could just leave everything I'm doing and take people to all the restaurants I love, because a lot of commenters would say, oh, we love your write-up, but we wouldn't know how to get there ourselves. And he said, well, why don't you? And I said, well, that's a ludicrous idea. No one makes money out of doing that. And over the course of that 45-minute conversation of my commute, he kind of convinced me why it was possible. And then 3 months later, I ended up actually leaving what I was doing to set up Frying Pan Adventures. So that's it. It came out of passion for the blog.
Or speaking to Arva Ahmed, the founder of Frying Pan Adventures. Now, if you go onto TripAdvisor, Frying Pan Adventures is ranked number 1 in the popularity index. And looking through TripAdvisor, if you look up Frying Pan Food Adventures, and just scrolling down the comments from people from Australia, Sydney in Australia, Seattle and Washington, you've got people from Houston, all giving you rave reviews. Now, you're obviously hitting something that people are loving. So how did you start putting together the tour and making sure that everything actually reached a certain level?
Sure. I think it's been a process of evolution. We're lucky to have such appreciative customers. But I think when the idea began, it was literally what I said earlier, which is just taking people to the restaurants I love. And obviously, that's not enough to be a sustainable idea. What happened in the year that we conceived the idea, which was in 2012. So Feb 2012, I started thinking about doing this. And then I realized, okay, I have to do this legally. So I have to get the license. And that process of getting the license, to cut it short, took pretty much a year. It took a year to figure it all out. And I'm actually really glad. Most people look at it as a headache, and at the time it was too. But that was one of my best moments to actually refine that product of a food tour, which is being done all over the world, but not in Dubai. So it was in that time that I started actually picking up books and reading, and I moved from online to offline reading, sort of going back to the traditional route and reading about food history and food culture. And one of the books that really has shaped what I do with the tours is a book called The Day of Honey by Anya Ciazaldo, where she's an American reporter whose husband is Lebanese. And she talks about her experience in Iraq after what she thought the Iraqi war was over, but it really wasn't. And she was seeing the after effects of it. When she tried to run away from that, she went to Lebanon. And then the turmoil in Beirut began after Rafiq Hariri got assassinated. So she has seen some of the worst times, but she didn't just write about politics. She wrote about food, culture, and politics. Food being the only thing that gives, as she says, war victims a sense of normalcy in those times. So it's actually not frivolous to talk about it. And she used food as the lens through which to see the Middle East, to talk about history, because as someone said, the dining table is the anthology of cultures. And that's what inspires me, that you can use the lens of food to suddenly start opening up discussions of dynasties, to open up conversations of what happened behind in the kitchens when the enemies were out on the battlefield. And that was a conversation that I wanted to start weaving into my tours, because usually the media gives you only the political side of the Middle East. And the politics is so in our face that we forget how rich the cultural heritage is. It's the same with my India tour. You see all of the Indian politics, and people after a point you just forget. And so we want to use food as that element which makes a culture that's almost fallen to the back seat. We want to bring it back out into the fore, and that's actually what's ended up shaping the tours and making it into the product that I think you're reading about on TripAdvisor now.
All right, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the actual tour in a moment, but you are here to help me go through the papers. Now, you've picked up on a story that's in 7 days today. It's highlighted as working up an appetite. Authorities are saying here that they want to encourage more home produce. Now, surely if there's more home produce being grown here, that should, you'd have thought, lead on to cost savings for the customer.
I mean, at least as per what they're saying, they're going to subsidize organic fertilizers, which is great for the farmers. I mean, as we were discussing, Andrew, you mentioned one of the farmers is really happy because it would help him increase the size of the farm and boost production. And personally, I mean, I'm the kind of person where I'm willing to pay the price for local produce. It tastes better. It's not always that organic produce has to taste better, but local produce, there's a really big difference between that and something that's been flash frozen and flown over miles and then stocked in, plastic wrapping in a supermarket. So I'm all for that initiative.
All right, we'll play the Nutcracker Suite, the finale from Tchaikovsky. Then we'll be talking about the nitty-gritties of the tours itself in Dubai. Frying Pan Adventures are in the studio with me. You do tours of restaurants in Dubai. You mentioned how you kind of work out the criteria of how those can get onto your tour. So whereabouts geographically do you do them?
Sure. We do different tours. The two primary ones that we're doing right now are the Arabic one, the Arabian food pilgrimage, which is where we focus in on Dera. Dera is the place I grew up on, specifically in sort of the area around Muraqaba that's very, very rich in a range of different Middle Eastern cuisines. So we do that. And then the other one is the tour of Little India, which my sister Farida runs. And that one happens in Meena Bazaar, so on the other side of the creek in Par Dubai. And that's sort of the hotspot for Indian street food as well as just regular Indian restaurant food.
And of course, the season at the moment is very pleasant to be out and about. Yeah. So obviously you have to change the way you do things when it gets into the hotter months.
It does, yeah. We definitely change. So what happens is during the summer, anyway, in the heat, people eat less. So you can't feed them like geese the way we do currently on our tours. It will not work. So we have a more streamlined menu where we pick 4 restaurants, and then we don't do any walking like we do on our regular tour. We actually take people in a van from restaurant to restaurant, and there's a lot of conversation, a lot of food history that gets shared in the van. The restaurants are actually quite close to each other, so you're not really in the van for any long period of time. And the benefit of having the van is now I can go off my beaten path and take people into some pretty amazing experiences. Let's say Iraqi meskoof, which is a kind of fish that I normally cannot feature on my regular tours.
So when you're actually going to a restaurant, how long do you spend in each restaurant, and how much food do you consume in each one?
I think it depends from restaurant to restaurant. Like, let's take my Arabic food tour. We cover probably around 4 savory stops and 3 sweet stops. And it depends. So my first restaurant stop, for example, will spend almost an hour and 15 minutes. It depends on the pace of the group. And the way we handle it is we explain to people they've got to pace themselves. But we help them with a pacing tool that I call percentages. So you divide your stomach up into percentages, and at every stop, I will tell you what percentage of that stomach space you should fill, so that by the end of it, you will be at 200%.
Right.
Okay. So this is really how we get people to pace. And throughout, we're trying to weave a story. So my first stop will usually be the longest stop, because I'm trying to sort of give you perspective of the whole region and the history and the culture. And after that, we then start moving much faster through the rest of the tour.
And you mentioned groups. When you're talking about group sizes, is there a limit to how many people will be on the tour with you at each time?
Yeah, that's a really important point. For our Arabic tours, we don't go over 10 people. And for the Indian one, not over 8. Just because of the size of the restaurants, we know how much it takes for them to be able to serve us and keep things efficient. So 8 to 10 people is basically our maximums. And also we want it to not feel like a tour. It should feel like a dinner party, and it becomes really impersonal if you have 50 people who just got off the bus to go to a restaurant. We never want to be that company who does that.
So in terms of the length of the tour, how long are we looking at?
The Arabic tour is 5 hours,
Oh.
and the Indian one is 4 hours. And we definitely, when people come and I'm like, I say, we're going to eat for the next 5 hours, they're just like, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And especially, I had my father, who is the best example. He's the most supportive of my tours. My father came on the tour. This man actually eats his meal in 20 minutes, usually, maximum. And he was just thinking, I'm never going to be able to do this. By the end of the 5 hours, he looked at his watch and he said, where did the time go? You don't realize. You're in a dinner party, you're talking to people, you're learning about history, you're constantly walking. So it's an entire experience. You don't actually think of it as I'm sitting down and eating for 5 hours. That doesn't happen.
And in terms of walking in between the restaurants, do you have to be physically fit? Can older people take part quite easily?
Yeah, we've had people who are older. We've, in fact, even had some people who hurt, let's say they had a leg injury and they didn't want to cancel their booking, so they still came and they were actually fine. We have just walking of, like 10 minutes between each restaurant stop at maximum, 10 to maybe 12 minutes. But there is, in a couple of places, there is quite a bit of standing. So in those cases, people who have leg issues, they usually will just sit down somewhere. We wait for them. It's not such a big problem.
So check it out, Frying Pan Food Adventures. Go on to TripAdvisor first of all and have a look through the reviews. First of all, you'll see that it's very difficult to find. There isn't any bad reviews at all. So there we go.
I'm sure we have stuff, and the bad reviews keep you honest. So I think
absolutely.
That's good.
So if people want to find out more information, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way is through our website. We actually we do everything online, so you can find everything from our tour booking calendar. You can see which tour dates are available. You can access the booking form online. If you don't see a tour date that you want, or you want a private customized tour, all the information is up online on fryingpanadventures.com, and there's a contact sheet. So if you can't find something, just hit the help button on the contact form and you should be able to get in touch with us directly.
It's been fantastic chatting to you this morning. Thank you so much for coming in, Arva Ahmed, the founder of Frying Pan Adventures. Thank you.
It was an honor. Thank you, Andrew.